Hello and welcome to the Out and Equal 2018 Town Hall Series. This is Isabel Porras, Out and Equal University Director. This is a 1-hour broadcast audio call. Please make sure you've turned on the speakers or your headphones and that the volume is all the way up. If you have any trouble listening, please chat in and I'll share a phone number for you to use. If you have any questions or comments during the call, please use the chat box on the left-hand side to share those. We'll be recording the session and it'll be available after the call. Before we begin today's conversation, I have a few announcements. The virtual summit series continues this month on Thursday the 22nd with Pride, Create a Symphony Between Your ERG and Marketing Team. Learn how corporations, Comcast and NBC Universal, as well as agency IMRE, are bringing marketers and ERGs together to execute holistic pride initiatives that lift brands and corporate profiles. In March, leaders from Northwestern Mutual's LGBT ERG will share tactical steps allies can take to support, advocate, speak out, and stand up in visible allyship for their LGBTQ+ colleagues, as told from a bisexual and straight perspective. Our global webinar series also continues in March with UN initiatives to advance LGBTQ equality in the private sector. Please note that the time for this March 14th call is to be announced, but hold the date. Look out for invitations to all of these webinars shortly, and please feel free to email university@outandequal.org with any questions about our webinars or other resources. I'm also very excited to invite you and your colleagues to a Building Bridges training in Jackson, Mississippi on March 8th. As part of our efforts to support LGBTQ workplace equality in the South, we'll be in Jackson to discuss issues impacting the community and to provide education and tools to create inclusive workplace climates. If you're close to Jackson, please join us. I also ask that you share this invitation with your contacts in the vicinity of Jackson, Mississippi. For more information, please visit our website, and I'll also chat out a link to the registration page in just a second. One more announcement, we'll be wrapping up our very busy March with our annual Momentum Gala celebration. We invite you to join us on March 29th in San Francisco for our annual Momentum Gala dinner featuring top entertainment and inspirational speakers alongside a cocktail reception and dinner. We're thrilled to announce special appearances this year by Ana Navarro, Anthony Rapp, Frenchie Davis, and Clorox CEO Benno Dorer. Our fabulous and dynamic host, Scott Nevins from Bravo's hit TV show The People's Couch, will lead us in festivities. Tickets are now available on our website. With that, let's turn to today's conversation. I ask that any members of the media on the call identify themselves via the chat, please. I'm so pleased to introduce Out and Equal's Chair of the Board of Directors, Michael Kopp.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you everyone for joining us on today's town call. I know we're going to have a great conversation as we get to know our new CEO for Out and Equal. During the call, please feel free to submit your questions using the Ready Talk functionality at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. We will do our best to answer your questions on today's call, but if we don't get to them, we will respond directly to you following today's call. Before we begin, I want to talk briefly about the search process that we utilized to find the new CEO for Out and Equal. Prior to my role as board chair for the board of Out and Equal, I had the privilege of leading the search committee for our new CEO. As a career HR professional, I've led talent and recruitment for some of the world's best-known companies. When asked to lead this search to find the new CEO for Out and Equal, following the transition of our former CEO and founder, Celeste Berry, I publicly said that this would be one of the most important pieces of work in my career. As a board, we knew that finding the best candidate to lead Out and Equal would be the pivot point in our organization's future. From launch to offer, the search took nearly 8 months. Our approach was well-planned, disciplined, and professional. We partnered with Korn Ferry International to ensure that we looked globally for the best talent available for such an important role for the LGBTQ community. We could have rushed the search, but we would have not been able to do in the best interest of our organization, our board, our corporate partners, and most importantly, the community which we serve. To provide insight into the process, we vetted more than 200 leaders from around the globe. We engaged stakeholders at every stage, and we held to the principles most important to Out and Equal: inclusion, diversity, and authenticity. Our slate of candidates represented the rich diversity of our community in all ways: race, gender, sexual orientation, and ethnicity, as well as professional backgrounds. Selected candidates went through a lengthy and multifaceted assessment process, and in the end, the candidate identified was chosen unanimously by our board of directors, by the search committee, and by the senior leaders of the Out and Equal staff. Everyone agreed unanimously that we found the new CEO in Erin Uritus. On today's call and throughout the upcoming year, Erin will be sharing her own story, so I'm not going to walk through her bio in today's call. I'd much rather share with you what I saw in Erin and what I know you will all come to see soon. Erin is one of the most dynamic and creative thinkers I've had the privilege of meeting. She is a passionate teacher while also holding a fervent excitement for learning. Erin leads with authenticity and warmth, with strength and vulnerability, and with business acumen and executive presence. She is a business-focused thinker and a courageous, bold actor. She is a sharp strategist, a trailblazing thought leader, and a visionary, a combination that we could have only dreamed of when we first started shaping this new role. We were very fortunate to have a strong slate of candidates for our search. However, in the end, Erin wasn't just a good candidate for the role, she was the best leader for the organization and our mission going forward. On behalf of the Out and Equal Board of Directors, it's my great privilege and honor to introduce you to Out and Equal's new Chief Executive Officer, Erin Uritus. So, Erin, with all that said, I'm going to start the conversation with a question that we ask you and every other candidate throughout the search process, and that is, for you, why Out and Equal and why now?
Thanks, Michael, and hello to everyone. I can see you on the phone. I'm so thrilled to have this opportunity. And Michael, thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's a bit overwhelming, and I just wanted to start by telling everybody how illustrative it is of the incredible welcome I've experienced so far throughout the search process that Michael mentioned, and certainly during my first several weeks with Out and Equal. I am really humbled by the legacy of founding CEO Celeste Berry and all that she and the wonderful staff at Out and Equal have built here in just 20 short years. Throughout my life, I've been inspired by pioneers and activists like Celeste and others who have faced discrimination and injustice and who chose to stand up and act at important moments. So why Out and Equal? Well, big question. I guess it's really a story about this inspiration and how I myself decided to act. I am the proud daughter of a social worker and two progressive parents, and so, in my upbringing, I've always worked for mission-driven causes and organizations, and in particular when supporting or leading them meant creating and sustaining a larger ripple of change. So, for example, in my early career by supporting women journalists in Africa, so that more of them were in decision-making roles as editors and producers, it then meant a greater chance we would get better global news coverage of certain issues like women and children's health and war and other important things. So in my mind, it's always been about an investment in the most impactful organizations. With how Out and Equal has carved out its mission and focused on supporting workplace equality, I think it has the same power. The power to help influence important organizations and individuals who then go on to lead the way for others around the world. So I personally really believe when we can bring our full selves to work, we're living our best lives and our companies are made better, our country is made stronger, and our world is made more full. So I've always felt that way about Out and Equal, which is the reason why I got involved so many years ago as a volunteer and then as a member of the board. And I guess the second part of your question, why now? And that's a big one and really important one in the story. So some people know or have read, I moved back to the U.S. After several years in the Middle East and just a few months before the election. And it was just me and my two little girls at the time who are half Arab Muslim. And so as they were hearing the buzz about the candidates, and even at the young age of 4 and 6 at the time, they were already beginning to absorb what was happening around us, asking if the president hated them and wondering if they needed to hide who they were. So they were with me. It was the three of us, during the Women's March, handing out rainbow tattoos at the queer dance party in front of the Trump Hotel and Mike Pence's house, and protesting in front of the White House when the Muslim ban was announced. And I must say, this is a very strange and somewhat surreal way to begin creating a family life back in the U.S. And I guess like many others at that point, Michael, I began thinking seriously about where I wanted to put my energy for the long haul. So again, looking for that opportunity to have a big impact, and that led me straight back to Out and Equal. And leading the organization at this time is so critical. In my mind, it's really a time for all hands on deck and for bold action and strategic partnerships where we're all unified in fighting what is happening now under this administration so that all of our gains are not actually lost. And I feel really fortunate to come into the organization right now, just not because of the historical opportunity, but because we are building on an extremely strong foundation with super talented and dedicated staff and board. We are in a really strong financial position. We've already expanded our international outreach and continue to do so. And we have really positive relationships with our sponsors and partners and constituents. Many of you are on the phone today. So honestly, it's almost too good to be true, but of course I will take it.
I love that answer, and it took me back as you were saying that to our conversations last fall during the interviews. And I remember listening to the first time I heard that answer and just being mesmerized by how the passion for Out and Equal comes from your core. So with that said, this is not the first time in your life that you've been kind of inspired into action during a tough national moment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. So, right, when I came home from working, I was in West Africa in my early and mid-20s, and I guess I had been dating women for a few years at that point, and like many of us, feeling really happy experiencing the positive cultural shifts, like when Ellen came out and the L Word was on TV, and of course you can forget Will and Grace, and we can't because they keep coming back, so that's great. But at the same time, and in a relatively short period, as many of you might remember, James Byrd Jr. was dragged to death in Texas, Matthew Shepard was killed in Wyoming, and the mass shooting happened in Columbine. I think that was all in less than a 12-month period. So I remember this like it was yesterday. I was loving the work I was doing in Africa, but I was feeling physically sick by what was happening in the U.S., and it actually felt like a weight on my shoulders. So at that point, I'm not sure it was a conscious choice, but I just remember saying to myself, I have to do something. And I packed up and moved to Colorado, as sometimes people in their 20s have the luxury to do. And I joined up with one of Matthew's friends. We received some seed money from Matthew's wonderful mom, Judy Shepard, and we tried to start a foundation focused on educating young kids about inclusion and respect. I think back then we were still saying tolerance. But the foundation never really got off the ground, unfortunately, but our work did culminate with an amazing 3-day hike on the first anniversary of Matthew's death, where a small group of us walked from Fort Collins all the way to the fence where Matthew was beaten and left for dead. And on those 3 days, we experienced the same kind of polarized emotion we're seeing now. Many people cheered us, with a thumbs up as they passed in their cars, and some people actually spit on us and were yelling at us. But when we arrived at that fence and we had some of these amazing teddy bears spilling out of our backpacks that had been made in the memory of Matthew and other hate crime victims, we just knew in our own way we were making a difference. And I have other stories like that, but I think it probably captures another moment early on when I was inspired to act.
It's amazing. I remember that time well, and just the emotions as you were talking through that answer just takes me back to that period. So thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. You mentioned during your answer about how the tone is so divisive in the country now and similar to as it was back then. So how do you position yourself as a leader in this movement? Tell us about your leadership in this moment, given where we are as a country and globally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I believe my leadership style is really about inclusivity, listening, collaborating, building, and it's all together. If you're following us on social media, and I really hope you are, you've already heard me talk about what I'm calling the big listen. From the moment my position was official, and Michael, you and I talked about it early on, I've really made it a priority for myself and the organization to shift into a space of listening and building relationships, strengthening relationships we have already, and co-creating the next phase for Out and Equal. And this is not only an important, I think, philosophy and approach in general, but I think a really necessary one as we begin a significant strategic planning effort this year at Out and Equal. Listening and collaborating with all of you will mean a better plan, and also one which really accurately reflects the input and needs of our stakeholders. So, that approach, I think, one of curiosity and genuine belief in the spirit of togetherness. It's the same approach I take when tackling everything from how we can support companies in Latin America to how we build bridges in Mississippi.
I love that answer. And speaking of Mississippi, I want to take a moment to just reflect back on what Isabel shared earlier about our program for Out and Equal in Jackson, Mississippi on March 8th. Just to remind everyone that free training is available. Erin, you and I got to participate in a training recently at Out and Equal and just sample a piece of our Building Bridges program. And I know for both of us, we walked away from that impressed with our material, but as well as the delivery of the content and the importance of the message. So just reminding people to RSVP for that.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm glad you brought that up. And that was indeed a really amazing training to go through. I know that we have taken an already good training, and Isabel and others on the team have made it even better. So I'm really looking forward to that training we're offering in Mississippi. And at the same time on the ground, the team will be hosting part of that big listen I mentioned. So they'll be, apart from the training, also gathering the wisdom of the community in Mississippi. I know we have a lot to learn and share, and I'm really pleased that we're deepening our roots all over the country, and in particular in rural and southern communities.
Absolutely, love that too. So this is exciting. We've kind of talked on a high level globally and leadership and things like that. Let's get a little bit more personal now with your background, Erin.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
So tell us about how you identify, if you're comfortable doing that, and about your journey in getting to where you are.
Sure, thanks. I so appreciate getting to talk about identity right now, and I'm actually a little obsessed with how we use language around it. So that's my shout out to our sexual and gender studies geeks out there who I could listen to for hours, some of whom I have on my staff, and we've been having a lot of fun in these discussions in just the first few weeks. I think in the past I've actually shut myself out of conversations, Michael, because I couldn't find the quote-unquote right language to discuss my identity in a way that I think felt good for me. And I've realized that, of course, after a few years of being away, especially, not only has the movement and the tone changed over the years in many ways, especially for younger folks, but the language attempting to address the complexities of identity and expression is really rich and often nuanced. So I have to admit, just a disclaimer here, I'm still and probably always will be in learning mode here around identity. But so about me, I am bisexual, pansexual, and queer. And it has taken me a long time to get to that language. I've known I was attracted to women for a long time, since I was just barely out of college. And I saw the Canadian movie, the wonderful movie When Night is Falling. Do you know that movie, Michael?
I'm embarrassed to say I do not.
Okay, well, it is fantastic, and if you were to see it, or if anybody else out there has, you will not only understand my attraction to women, but also to the circus arts, and especially trapeze. So, I had been raised in an open-minded family and found myself playing a very sincere ally to the LGBTQ community in college, but it never dawned on me until that moment that this was a possibility for me. It was really a lovely moment, actually. And, on a side note, Michael, I hear that narrative from a lot of other LGBTQ people, that film and television played such a big role in us finding ourselves. So, honestly, a sincere thanks to companies like Comcast, NBC, Universal, and Disney for making that happen, and, many other independent filmmakers around the world. And so I identified as a lesbian at first because that's what I had access to at the time, kind of the options in my own head of being straight or gay. And I knew I didn't feel straight anymore. Once I realized I actually could be bisexual, I knew that that really got closer to what described me. So I struggled a lot to, at first, with coming out as bi. I found it easier at work and really everywhere to come out as a lesbian than to come out as bi. And I know that's not true for everybody, but for me, I got a lot more raised eyebrows on the bisexuality. And I remember a family member even saying to me, Erin, I wish you were just a lesbian, because at least that I could understand. So I guess, which on one hand felt like it could be coming from a place of curiosity, but honestly that's hard to hear, of course. And so, yeah.
So I think your story, Erin, really probably speaks to a lot of people in our community. Not exactly yours, because I think all of our stories are unique, but our identities are more fluid and more complex. And I know there's probably a lot of people listening right now that really connect with your story, so thank you for sharing that. And thank you for kind of revealing your evolution in your story. I appreciate that too. Mm-hmm. I want to touch on something you said, though, about how it was harder to come out as bisexual. Can you share more with us about that? Because I think that's important for our community to know about.
Sure, absolutely. So for me, Michael, when I joined the Globe ERG at Booz Allen, which is where I was working at the time, a group of us got to go to the Orlando Summit. So that was early in Out and Equal's history, and it was a lot smaller back then, but the summit still had, I think, about 88 workshops or panels. And I remember looking at the program and zoning in on the one bisexual workshop that was in the program, and then actually lying to my gay colleagues, if you can believe it, so I could sneak into that room where I was sure I would be the only one. I think I even had planned to tell them in the room that I was a lesbian ally, so that's pretty funny. But in actuality, the room was packed, and everyone was very emotional, lots of tears and sharing about the painful experiences of not being able to come out to the straight world and having a lot of difficulty coming out in the community if your sexual identity and experience looked a certain way or didn't look a certain way. So for me, that was really monumental. Everything changed at that moment. I not only met a lot of other bisexuals at the summit, but began to see my own experience reflected in new language that I really craved, and that I could then evolve that language into, for myself, into something I owned. So I found the courage to, I guess after that, I found the courage to confront some gay colleagues in the ERG who during one meeting, I recall quite vividly, said that no transgender or bisexuals existed in the company, which we were more than 10,000 people, I think, even at the time. So that's, pretty bold statement. And I think, Michael, that's just a powerful moment when you stand up and say, this is me, I'm here, challenge people's assumptions and frankly, hypocrisy, and begin a new kind of dialogue. And I'm so happy I did that, because I think it started some really great conversations in the ERG, and it immediately changed us for the better. I think even if I was still the only one who came out as bi at that time, and probably for a little while. And I just want to say one more thing about that. My experience in Orlando, I think, really underscores the power of these magical, I call them magical moments that happen at an Out and Equal Summit. And it's one I'm forever grateful for. I know many of you out there who are listening have had magic moments of your own. So I look forward to, if we get a chance to talk, hearing about those from you as well.
Erin, something just occurred to me that I didn't connect before with our past. It was an Out and Equal Summit in Minneapolis that gave me the courage to be my true and authentic self in the workplace. And I see the value that's had for me in my career to where I am today and where you are. And I just think it's so amazing that two people who owe so much to an Out and Equal Summit have ended up as the CEO for Out and Equal and as the board chair. So I just really am touched by the impact it's had on us, and I'm sure a lot of other people too.
That's amazing.
So speaking of Summit, now that you're the CEO of Out and Equal, what can we expect different in the Summit this year and going forward?
Oh, well, I'm really excited. It's an incredible team here, as you know, Michael, that puts the Summit on, starting with so many people on this call. And and you all that bring your companies and workshops and energy to this event. So I really just wanted to thank you all. I think it's going to be an incredible year this year. We just came back from our first site visit in Seattle, and some of that's documented in fun ways on social media. So you can see us visiting the Seattle fish market. And we have some big surprises you'll get to hear more about later. What I'm really focused on is, like I said, kind of extending that magic that I talked about between summits. So the summit's going to be amazing. And then I think even more importantly, Michael, we are going to create some new and creative ways for people to stay engaged with us throughout the year. We're going to be looking at different ways to support the whole community, support you beyond those 4 days, and maybe new ways digitally to provide access to these really cool dialogues and relationships that start at Summit. We're also launching our office hours, where people can call in and receive consultation about diversity and inclusion strategy and implementation. That's brand new. Events like Mississippi, which we heard a lot about today. There are town calls and in-person meetings. There's LGBTQ briefings that we're starting to do more of. Government Leadership Day, of course, which I'm super excited about, residing in DC. And, of course, we've got Executive Forum coming up, Equality Institute, and our fantastic global programs.
That's great. And I want to ask you about the global programs. Before I do, we had a message that came in while you were talking in our chat function, and I want to read it for the benefit of everyone, just so that we see what a community we are and how we're here to be allies to each other, regardless of LGBTQ or any other way we identify ourselves. But a person wrote in and said, "Thank you for sharing that it's harder to come out as bisexual. I look forward to creating more awareness with you. You're making my heart happy and inclusive." So I just think that just shows the level of community that we're building already. And so thank you for sharing your story. So you mentioned global programs. Can you tell us more about the global programs, Erin?
Yes, absolutely. So as some of you might know, I spent 9 years overseas working in the Middle East and a few years getting to work in West Africa and around the subcontinent. And, of course, lots of travel in between. So global really has a special place in my heart and a serious spot on our agenda. We will be in China, India, and Brazil this year, and we are building networks and helping to connect leaders in those countries and others around the world, which is really exciting. We basically meet companies wherever they are in their D&I journey, but I'll tell you that some of our most fulfilling work is really helping a company bring their promise of equality and commitment to inclusion to a country where they never thought it was possible. It's empowering and really life-changing work. I'm so proud of it, and I'm really looking forward to leveraging some of my international experience towards that goal.
Excellent. Well, Erin, I want to make sure that we leave time for our audience members to ask questions. But before we do, I thought we would play like a little word association game. So if you don't mind, I'm going to give you a word, and you give me the response in a one word.
Okay.
So are you ready for it?
Sounds good.
All right,
yep.
Gay.
Let's go. Lesbian.
Gay. Bisexual.
Lesbian. Oh, me.
Transgender.
Authenticity.
ERGs.
Leaders.
Diversity.
Critical.
Inclusion.
Stronger.
Courage.
Advocates.
Summit.
Seattle.
Seattle.
Summit and Fish Market.
Allies.
Heroes.
Authenticity.
Leadership.
Belonging.
The Holy Grail.
Excellent. Future.
Together.
All right, excellent. Now that we've got your juices flowing there, so thank you so much for sharing the information with us with those questions. But I do want to go over to the questions that are coming in pretty fast and furious right now from our listeners. So I think we'll jump on this one first. The first question is, what do you think the role of affiliates are in the future of Out and Equal?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm not sure if people have read in my bio, but I have a lot of experience on my own with affiliates with Out and Equal, because we launched, I was one of the co-founders of the affiliate chapter in DC, and that was the same year that we were getting ready to do the DC Summit. And so I was co-chair of the summit with Wes Combs and Yvette Burton, but at the same time, we had a group of us who were just really energized and excited about preparing for it and leveraging that moment to start our affiliate chapter. So I really believe in affiliates, Michael. I think that the power inherently of affiliates to spread the ripple effect and advance the mission of Out and Equal, that is one I believe we all share locally, is really exciting to me. So I look forward to, this year, part of our strategic planning process in the whole listening tour is going to be taking a deeper dive with people who have been involved in affiliates that still are, and I want to shout out to Jim Huberty out there, because I'm from Chicago and I know Jim's been really active in that chapter. We've got a lot of folks around the country who have been doing great work in affiliates, and I just want to say that we will be out digging in a bit and asking you more questions, helping feed data in so that we keep imagining the future with affiliates in the most powerful way and move forward together.
I could not agree with you more. I think our affiliates help amplify the work that we do as an organization, and that's key in the environment that we were talking about earlier. So thank you for that. So another question came in, said, earlier you said Holy Grail when Michael said belonging. What do you mean by that?
It's quite a big dramatic statement, isn't it? So I guess what I mean by that, and something that we've been talking a lot about at Out and Equal in just the last few weeks, is this idea that, we started with this idea of diversity, and diversity is I don't want to say it's easy to achieve, but when we go and we can grab anybody and stick them in a certain position, and somebody could say, oh, we have diversity. And so moving beyond that, one begins to think about inclusion, and inclusion is where, on the continuum, a lot of people are, and inclusion really lives in the policies and kind of documents of an organization, and of course getting into how we begin treating each other. But this idea of belonging, and the reason why I said Holy Grail, is it's really keeping the momentum going forward on that continuum, and digging in deep with each other and asking about how are we really inclusive work environments, and that really resides in everybody being able to be their authentic selves, and in those really tactical kind of practices and relationships that are happening in the workplace. And so we don't have the answer to that, but it's a pursuit that we care very much about, which is creating those cultures of inclusion and real belonging, where workplaces are leveraging all the available talent, that people feel fulfilled and like they're really productive and happy at work, and the whole organization is not only healthy but benefiting, and the bottom line is benefiting as well as the culture.
Well, we know we have inclusive work environments. That allows people to bring their authentic selves, which allows them to bring the discretionary effort into the workplace. So as we focus on kind of the value we have for our employers, that's key in creating that Holy Grail of inclusion. So thank you for that. The next question is around the role of ERGs in our movement and Out and Equal. Can you talk a little bit about what you see the role of the ERGs being?
Absolutely. I mean, ERGs as well, and I have a huge soft spot for ERGs. I did a lot of work when I was at Booz Allen with ERGs, and as I began doing more volunteer work with Out and Equal, I was even doing some of the pre-summit full-day workshops where we would work with some of you all in the ERGs to strengthen your individual leadership, but also just teamwork, essentially, and team building of such an important mechanism. So, ERGs, I think, are really important, critical places in organizations where people can find, can build relationships and network. It's more strength in numbers and being able to approach, if you're not out, finding strength about, how you can be out in your personal life, get coaching on how to navigate that at work, and certainly to be able to go, I think, in a more concise way to the leadership when ERGs are playing a pivotal role in trying to get policies influenced. So, ERGs are just, I think, very important mechanisms. And if you think about, too, Michael, how we talk a lot about intersectionality, and I think ERGs, at least when I was at Booz and saw the power of when certain ERGs start coming together, I think there's even more of an opportunity as we progress for individual ERGs within a company to come together and keep addressing people as whole people. So if an LGBTQ ERG and a parents forum or ERG gets together and has conversations that are really meaningful, important for a cross-section of the company, I think those are just really important ways to keep this dialogue going and address people as whole people in a holistic way.
Absolutely agree. I've seen ERGs play incredible roles in people's career development through all the things that you were talking about, through actively being engaged and getting out there so you're exposed to different parts of the business. So absolutely agree. So this kind of ties into ERGs because it's the role of allies. What would you say are the top one or two suggestions for people to continue supporting inclusion in their personal and professional lives as allies?
Oh, it's such a great question. And I know for, allies who are out there, just asking that question is the first step. And I think there's just so much cross-section with allies in our community, people who have LGBTQ children and friends. There's just really no separation anymore around this common goal. So I think just asking the question is really important, and not just asking me the question, but asking your colleagues who are closest to you, what can I do? I'm an ally. Approaching your ERG and specifically asking how you can get involved. And I think just continuing to be this bridge in between the communities so that you can stand up as a good example and coach your colleagues who may not be in the LGBT community. They may not even be friendly to the cause, but I think when people stand up and do the right thing and take those opportunities to coach others around them in private moments, private and public moments, both in a quiet sense and broader platforms, it's so important because it really sets the example, and change will come because of you.
Absolutely agree. We've got a couple more questions, but if anyone has anything else they want to submit, feel free to. But Erin, this goes back to the question around bi inclusion. It says, I'm a member of an ERG, and I'm realizing on this call that we haven't spent much time talking about bi inclusion. Do you think there's something that ERGs need to do or be working on and talking about?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Yes, I think so. And I would really love to, as we proceed through the year with the listening tour, and there's multiple ways to get us this information, but I would love for people on the phone to write in with your own experiences around this. I know that things have progressed in many cases, but in others, some people in our community are still hiding from each other. So just as one example, I think it was last week, I just received a really poignant letter from a woman in a top tech firm. And she said that she had been dating women and came out at the age of 17 as bisexual, and ended up marrying a wonderful man whom she loves, and they have a child together 10 years now. Well, she is an active member of the company's ERG, but she's hiding as a straight ally. She's actually afraid to come out as bi within the ERG. And if you're on the phone and listening, the woman who wrote this in, I just want to tell you, I see you, I hear you. This is really, my story as well. And in my opinion, I think we have to work a lot harder, Michael, to make sure that all people in our community can feel like they can come forward and be accepted. As I mentioned before, I believe we really need all hands on deck, and quite simply, we're stronger together than fighting about our queer credentials, if you will.
Agreed. I think one of the things I would challenge all of us on this call to make sure that we do, and that is to be an ally for others. So we always talk about allies for the LGBTQ community, but we ourselves can be allies for the other communities. And I think we're hearing right now, for us as a community, we need to be an ally for the bi community, based on the questions and based on your comments and your story that you shared. So Erin, one of the questions, you've talked about the listening tour and collecting data. What do you plan on doing with that data, and how will that impact the future of Out and Equal's programming as you go through and collect it over the next several months?
Oh, thanks so much for that question. And I realize it may come from a place, and certainly understandable, where, like in other organizations I've worked with and consulted with, sometimes organizations ask questions and then you as a stakeholder don't necessarily see the result of that, or even insight into the promise. So into the process. So one of the things I'm really committed to is not only really smart data gathering and going out in multiple ways. So it started with just like what I call the mini survey upon the announcement that I would be starting. And we're going to be probably doing different surveys and focus groups throughout the year. We are definitely going to be doing interviews with representatives. Our board and the organization in embarking on strategic planning, we're giving a lot of thought upfront to how best to do this in a really strategic way, and then we'll be communicating with the whole community throughout the year about where we are in the process. I have a big and bold vision and dream, hopefully, where we will really engage, all 5,000 people in Seattle coming up and be communicating about this plan, and possibly at that point, depending on where we are, using that large gathering to actually continue that process on and listen in a mass forum. So there's lots we're going to be doing with it, and the process is going to be transparent. We're going to be communicating a lot about this to everybody.
I love your plans, Erin, that we've talked about in terms of the transparency and the use of technology as we communicate with our community throughout Out and Equal, and especially at Summit, but in other places. I applaud that. So a couple other questions. Can you tell us your thoughts on supporting our colleagues, our LGBTQ colleagues that are federal employees, and the role that Out and Equal will play with them?
Oh, thank you so much for that, Michael. Just in a few days, we're going to be publishing. I wrote an open letter just a few days ago thinking about our federal colleagues, especially those in ERGs. Michael, I'm sure and a lot of people on the phone have been listening to the news and watching what's happening. There are things that are occurring where the attempts to kind of enshrine discrimination in the structure of federal agencies, like the Division of Conscience that's being stood up in HHS, or requiring government agencies to not use certain language. At every moment, I would imagine that it is really difficult to continue on executing the mission of the organization while you're working in an organization that may not seem very friendly anymore to you as a person. So we just really want to support our federal employees in every part of the community, and those allies that believe and are helping our cause. We will be doing more events for you this year, and probably some special town calls. And I reside in DC now, between San Francisco and DC, but Karen Irish and I, who's heading up our government relations, we will be coming out and meeting with a lot of ERG leaders in the government. So I feel really good that we're going to come together and have more conversation about this, and to the extent that we can, really work hard to support all of you that are working in the government.
Excellent, thank you. One other question that came in, and I'll read because it's got a lot of great information in it or details in it that I want to make sure I address for you and your question. A recent report by Open for Business looked at the power of the LGBTQ inclusive cities, which was essentially a business case for cities being more inclusive. What do you think of this theory, and do you see a connection with the business case for LGBTQ inclusion in the workplace?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I'm reminded of, I don't know if anybody on the phone was part of this, but several years ago, Dr. Richard Florida was invited to an Out and Equal Summit. I believe it was Chicago. And he was the one that wrote the book Rise of the Creative Class and then Flight of the Creative Class, if I'm remembering that correctly. Anyway, some of that early work he did went on to inform a lot of the creative city movements, which were essentially looking at ways where a cross-section of stakeholders could come together in individual cities to make them more inclusive, with the idea that that business would benefit from it, and that it would kind of strengthen government from the inside in terms of being inclusive in their processes and governance. So it's such a great question. I actually read about half that report, and I need to dive in and keep reading it, because I think this idea of just leveraging corporations and organizations and governments, and then you've got community-based organizations and nonprofits and academic institutions. So many of these stakeholders want to come together and build inclusive cities, and some people may come from different angles. Some of it may be more about the business case. Some of it's really about, culture and kind of what happens when a city is inclusive in terms of, being attractive culturally to especially a younger generation. So I think there's a huge opportunity there, and I would love for anybody on the phone who wants to, throw their voice into this and give us some feedback. But just from a very high perspective, Michael, I think a very high level, I think that there's a lot that we could work with there and work to, support those cities that have already had these movements started or thinking about it, and maybe advise them. And certainly for all of you that may be residing, in different cities around the country, that we could, bring all of you together as well to help leverage those efforts that may already be in place.
Well, and we've seen that topic in the headlines even this week, right? With the Amazon being reminded to look at inclusive cities and states for their second headquarters that they're building, and the economic boom that would be for any of the city that will eventually be chosen. But just the power of inclusion to attract business we see in the headlines today. So, Erin, with that, I think I'm going to wrap up. We had over 400 people sign up for our call today, so thanks to everyone who signed up and either listened live or will listen to the replay. Also, thank you to our supporting companies for your engagement in making this work possible. Thank you to the incredible staff, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm amazed every day with the work that they do, not only with the programs like Summit and Forum and Building Bridges, but just the support they provide to our partner companies and our partners, our employees in those companies. Thank you to the board for your leadership, and most of all, I say this personally and professionally and on behalf of the board and the organization to you, Erin. Thank you for joining us and giving us your amazing gift of leadership and your personal story today. For everyone, have a great day. We'll see you in San Francisco in a few weeks for Executive Forum, or if not, we'll see you in Seattle for the Workplace Summit in October. Erin, any final thoughts from you?
Oh, thanks, Michael. I was hoping you'd ask because I really wanted the opportunity as well to thank you personally. I think, having you at the head of the search process, it has really been wonderful. I'm really excited for your leadership and to be co-leaders of Out and Equal with the board in the next year. And like I said, it's just illustrative of the welcome that I've had so far. And I wanted to thank all of you on the phone anybody who hasn't had a chance to fill in the very first step, it's not the last, but just the very first one of filling out that survey on the homepage, we've already heard from more than 80 people in just a short amount of time. I read every single entry, and I just want to thank you for your interest and my support of me. It's been overwhelming, really, and I'm just really excited for a fun year ahead. And one more, Michael. I'm so sorry. I'm so appreciative for the staff. Rachel, my COO, and all of the staff at Out and Equal. You are all extremely talented and have been very generous and welcoming to me, and I just really wanted to thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin, and thank you for your time and everything that you're giving to Out and Equal. Isabel, now we'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you both, and thank you to everyone on the call. Just inviting you to our next webinar, which will be the Virtual Summit Series on February 22nd, and you can view all of our archived webinars on outandequal.org/webinars. We will be sending out an email with the recording for this, and at the end of this call, you will be linked to Erin's listening tour virtually, so you can leave some feedback for her. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.